Welcome back to Anthropology. If you're reading this lesson or listening to it, you're likely taking Cultural Anthropology or Introduction to Anthropology. So far we've covered anthropology, its place in the sciences and humanities, and the 4, sometimes 5 fields of anthropology. You've also learned about cultural anthropology and the fact that cultural anthropologists use ethnography to provide data on cultures and ethnography to explain cultural differences or similarities. So here we go, method and theories in cultural anthropology. In this lesson, you'll learn about ethnographic methods, which are techniques that anthropologists use to collect data on the people they're studying, as well as theories, which are sometimes called paradigms, models, or schools of thought in anthropology. They're just different perspectives on how to look at anthropology. The goals of this lesson are to know the definition of ethnography, understand participant observation, as well as other methods of ethnography, aka ethnographic techniques or methods, in your textbook. By now, you have hopefully already realized that there are 2 main components to cultural anthropology: ethnography, which is a detailed description of a particular culture primarily based on fieldwork, and ethnology, the study and analysis of different cultures from a comparative point of view. Each of these takes place in various areas throughout the world, from post-industrial societies to small communities. These terms can be confusing. Ethnography and ethnology sound very similar. For the rest of the chapter, if you hear the word ethnography or hear about an ethnographer, just think that that is a cultural anthropologist, and we're talking about cultural anthropology. So doing ethnography is doing cultural anthropology. In this lesson, I will summarize how ethnographers or cultural anthropologists do their work. Be sure to make sure you're on the right chapter in our book. Check your syllabus and the course schedule for the right book and the right chapter. In this case, we're most likely studying chapter 13 of the Katak book. If that's not the book you're using, be sure that you are checking the course materials to make sure you're studying the right chapter. Ethnography. Traditionally, the process of becoming a cultural anthropologist has required field experience in another society. Early ethnographers studied small-scale, relatively isolated societies with simple technologies and economies. Traditionally, ethnographers have tried to understand the whole of a particular culture. Your textbook describes ethnography as the drawing on varied techniques to piece together a picture of otherwise alien lifestyles. I've already discussed the history of anthropology in previous lessons, but the history of ethnographic research goes back to European colonialism and imperialism, when people from Europe were encountering people from other societies. So people from Europe were going all over the world and meeting all sorts of different people with different lifestyles. And today, cultural anthropologists can do their work in all societies on the globe. There's a preconceived notion that anthropologists only study quote-unquote tribal societies, but that's not true. As you'll see in the video this week on Malinowski, if you've been assigned to watch that video, anthropologists can study societies anywhere. So here we go, ethnographic methods. Likely chapter 13 in your book. Check to double check the right chapter. Sometimes it's chapter 3. It just depends. All right. Ethnographic fieldwork is extended on-location research to gather detailed and in-depth data or information on culture through participation in a collective social life. I've made the comparison before that archaeologists and cultural anthropologists both study human culture. Archaeologists study culture by excavating and collecting data on material remains. Ethnographers collect data on human culture by observing and learning more about people, living people, by observing their daily lives and talking to them. In order to do ethnography or fieldwork, an anthropologist will go through a process similar to the scientific method, where they set up a research question, collect data, so on and so forth. In this case, you will select a site of where you want to do your research, find the funding, and get the permission. Make sure you know your specific research question and do background research. Interview others with knowledge of the area, do academic research, research the language, choose the perspective, the theoretical perspective or paradigm you might be applying to this project, and formulate a more specific research question. Step 4 will be to select the ethnographic methods and carry those out. And there are many methods, the most important of which is participant observation. So keep that in mind and write that down. Participant observation is the most important ethnographic method. There are also genealogies, interviews, questionnaires, mapping, structured observations, archival research and ethnohistories, as well as photography and filming. And I'll talk more about those later in the lesson. Anthropologists collect two types of data, and these are the common types of data used by many researchers or scholars: quantitative data and qualitative data. Quantitative data is statistical or measurable information, such as demographic composition, the types and quantities of crops grown, the ratio of spouses born, and those are just examples. Qualitative data is non-statistical information, such as personalized stories and customary beliefs and practices. Here we go. Participant observation is the cornerstone of ethnographic fieldwork. As I said earlier, it's the most important method. For this method, the ethnographer or anthropologist will live with and become as integrated into the society as possible. They will pay attention to and record the details of daily life, and while they're doing that, they'll keep personal diaries, establish rapport throughout the community, because ethnographers cannot be totally impartial and detached. This is very important to remember. That's where the personal diaries come in, to keep the process reflexive and keep track of one's own kind of biases and emotions and shortcomings during the research. So participant observation is an ethnographic method in which one learns about a group's behaviors and beliefs through involvement and observation within the community. As part of their ethnographic research, the anthropologist closely observes, records, and engages in the daily life of another culture. In participant observation, one takes part in the events one is observing, describing, and analyzing. This concludes part 1 of this lesson. Follow on to part 2 for other ethnographic methods.